This morning is part number 3 of the story from Joesph, from slave to deputy Pharaoh. Before we get into today's, let's be reminded of what we have come to know so far. Beginning with the first week when we saw God's story begins with the beginning, with creation. And so we're going to take a look at something I've been trying to show you for 3 weeks, but I think I finally have the bugs out, and we will see. Okay, so God's story begins at the very beginning with creation. And you remember that God creates everything, and He creates humans, and He says, it's very good. And then we rebel. We break the reality of God's vision of walking in the garden with us. And God has to come up with a second plan. He destroys all things except for Noah, who is righteous, and a few, and starts over. But Noah gets off the ark, and sin comes with him. And so God decides that He is going to build for Himself a nation. And He does it very unlikely, with a very unlikely set of people, an old couple, Abram and Sarai, who become Abraham and Sarah. I found this 3-minute clip of the story of Abraham. You can't do it any better or any faster than this. It's very comprehensive, and so I want to share it with you just to catch us up to snuff. So, here is the story of Abram.
There once was a man named Abram, who was a descendant of Noah. God told him to move with his wife Sarah, an entire family, away from where they lived. God made a promise: I will make you into a great nation and bless you, and all of the people on earth will be blessed through you. So Abram and his family left. At one point, they stopped, and God told him to look around. All the land that you see, I will give to you and your children. Then, one night, God took Abram outside. Look up and count the stars. This is the number of children you will have. But Abram was already 75 years old, and Sarai was way too old to have children. So they decided that Sarai's servant Hagar should have Abram's child. Hagar became pregnant and gave birth to a son named Ishmael. Yet, God told Abram again, you will be the father of many nations. God changed their names to Abraham and Sarah and promised that it would be through Sarah that God's blessing would come. Exactly as God promised, Sarah became pregnant, giving birth to a son named Isaac. When Isaac was still a young boy, God told Abraham to take his son up on a mountain and sacrifice him. Abraham took Isaac, laid him on an altar, and took out his knife to kill him. But an angel stopped Abraham, and God provided a ram to sacrifice in place of Isaac. Years later, Abraham and Sarah died and left everything they owned to Isaac. Isaac married and had twin sons, Jacob and Esau. Esau was Isaac's favorite, and as the oldest, he was set to gain his father's inheritance. But Jacob wanted the inheritance, so he came up with a scheme to trick his father, who was now old and blind, into promising it to him. He dressed in Esau's clothes and put animal skin on his hands, because Esau's hands were very hairy. Confused, Isaac gave his blessing to Jacob and promised him the inheritance instead of Esau. This caused a huge fight, one that almost ended in murder before they went their own ways. Thankfully, they reunited, and God promised to bless Jacob's family. Jacob had 12 sons of his own, and like his father and grandfather before him, Jacob had a favorite son. Little did Jacob know that his favoritism would put his son, Joesph, in danger of being killed by his own brothers.
Okay, so now we are at Joesph. Joesph, who goes from bondage to deputy Pharaoh. This story, like all of God's stories, is filled with the most unlikely and all of humanity's, you throw it in there, it's a part of the story. Because it's a real story. If you were making up the story of your ancestors, if you were making up the story of your faith, you would not add, you would not come up with this stuff. Because this stuff really shows the ugliness and the bad side of humanity. You take the worst of the worst, and it's in the story. Joesph is a son, one of the 12 sons of Jacob. Jacob, who will become Israel. Remember, Abram became Abraham. Sarai became Sarah. God has a way of changing names when he gets a hold of you. You're not the same person. And since you're not the same person, you need a new name. Jacob wrestles with the divine and all day long. And when he's done, he is told that you no longer will be Jacob, your name will be Israel. So the promise of Abraham passes through to Isaac. Isaac passes to Jacob. Now Jacob has 12 sons, his favorite. He makes a multicolored coat and he gives it to him. And this picture over here is of that multicolored coat. Of course, you're probably looking for Donny Osmond, because I think Donny played that on stage. Joesph and the Technicolor Dream Coat, I think it was called. And this whole story is just filled with every human possibility and condition you can think of. So Joesph goes from his father's favorite son and his brothers who hate him. And as you read the story, you can really sort of get a grasp of, yeah, he's sort of a snot-nosed little brat. I think I'd beat him up too if he was my brother. Because not only is he dad's favorite, it says right off the bat what? He tattles on his brothers. He goes and gives his father an ill report of what they're doing and what they're up to. And his father gives him this coat showing that he is the favorite. And then he goes to his brothers and he says, hey, you know what? I've had a dream. Listen to this dream. And basically what this dream is not only am I the favorite, I'm the chosen one, I'm the apple of Dad's eye, but I'm going to rule over all of you one day. You're going to bow down and work for me. Now pretend you're the older brother, just for a moment, or some of the older brothers. And you have this no account who doesn't do anything but lay around the tent all day long and eats olives and, gets Dad's best camel to go out on dates with and, gets his fancy clothes. And you're out there, working hard and he's telling Dad bad things about you. Now he says that even though you're older, and in a society where older sibling is very important, he's saying they're going to reverse everything and the younger is going to rule. Well, they all have the same father, but they have different mamas, okay? They have different mamas, okay? So they are half-brothers of old Joe, and they get this idea, let's just do away with this brat. Let's kill him. Reuben, the guy they named the sandwich after, says, no, that doesn't do us any good, doesn't give us any benefit at all if we kill him. Let's throw him down this well. It's dry. Let's just put him down there. No one can hear him. No one can see him. And then we'll take that fancy coat of his and we'll tear it up and put some blood on it. And we'll tell Dad that wild animal got him. He'll believe it. So they do. They throw him down in the pit. They throw him down in the pit, and we don't know how long he stays there, but there he is in the pit, and he's looking up, and he's seeing his brothers. Now, imagine for a moment that you're down in the pit. And maybe in your life and in your living, you've been in the pit. Sometimes we say we got kicked under the bus, right? We know what that means. We get kicked under the bus. Well, he not only got kicked under the bus, but he get kicked down into the hole. Have you in your life and in your living been down in the hole? Do you know what betrayal is? By definition, you might know what it is, but in your living, do you know what it is? Have you been betrayed, trusted, loved, hung out with, and those same folk or person who loved you, who you hung out with, who you trusted, threw you under the bus, threw you down the hole. And so you're down in the pit, and all you got is betrayal. And now, let's say that's as far as we go in the story. How's God gonna do this? God says that I'm going to redeem my creation. I'm going to take all of creation and I'm going to get it back to where I envisioned it to be. A total paradise. Where there is no sin, no toil, no damage, no work, no sweat. Where I and my creation are together. Where we walk together. Where we talk together. Where everything is wonderful and death is no more. God's plan is to do that through Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and now Joesph. And where's Joesph? He's down in the pit. He has been forsaken by his family. He has been deceived. He has been manhandled. He's been thrown to his doom. And sitting down there, this is God's plan. Something is going to happen. Well, right about this point, I think Satan and all of his minions are celebrating. They got to look at that and think, that God, what a fool. How can God pull this one off? When he made a promise he obviously can't keep, because there's Joesph, the son of Jacob, who the lineage goes through and only through him. It's not like there's a backup plan. This is it. Our whole existence, our whole eternity, our salvation, God's tikkun olam, restoration of his creation, is down there in the pit with nobody coming to the rescue. No hope. Have you been in the pit? Do you know somebody who has been in the pit? Do you get this sense of how awful and terrible and desperate this situation is? And how the minions are laughing and thinking they have creation firmly. How everybody else has to be sitting around thinking, man, this stuff is going to hell in a handbasket quickly. And there's Joesph. And pretty soon some strangers, some of those other people, you know the other people. We all got an idea who those other people are, if we're honest with ourselves, if we're not trying to do the old mealy mouth, well, I'm a Christian and I love everybody. Yeah, we're supposed to, but you know deep in your soul you need a Savior because you got a list of them other people. We all do. Those other people who aren't like us, those other people who don't think or believe like us, or look like us, or smell like us, or eat like us, or dress like us. Those other people, whoever they are, they come along now. And my brothers, my family, my kinfolk are going to sell me to them for some shekels. If you look at the story of Joseph, you're going to start seeing some themes that run throughout God's story. In a desperate situation, God is close, always. In fact, when you are at your most desperate, when you are at your darkest hour, when you're hurting the most, when you seem to be all by yourself, when there seems to be no hope, when you seem to be down and out, at the bottom of the pit, that is when, my friends, that is when God, your Creator, is most close. He's there. That's his theme. And this Joesph, who gets sold for some shekels, somebody else later on gets sold for some shekels. 30 pieces of silver. And they sell him. And off he goes, and they take him down to Egypt. They take him down to Egypt, to the place of the enemy. And in this place of the enemy, where they take him, he gets in trouble. He is falsely accused. He's falsely accused and is thrown into jail. His boss's wife wants to have a thing with him, and he refuses. She lies. He's in jail. So it goes from the pit, now to jail. And as he's in jail, okay, this guy right here in jail, the devil and the demons got to be thinking, yeah, you got him out of the pit. For what? How are you going to do this, God? How are you going to claim and restore and bring Messiah into the world when the only person it's riding on doesn't have a chance? And the story goes on. He's in jail. He befriends somebody. He interprets a dream for them. They get out. It looks like he has a chance because he says, remember me. Remember me. When you make it big, when you get out there, remember me. And guess what? He's forgotten. Have you ever been forgotten? You help somebody along. You give them the best of what you got. You hope they succeed. You hope they make it. And they do. And they forget about you. You're non-consequential. Once you've given what you can give, you no longer matter. Humans do that to humans. Perhaps you've done that to somebody. It happened to Joesph. It happens to us. He's forgotten about. But down the road, Pharaoh, the king, the Caesar, the Tsar, the top dog, he has a dream. And he wants to know what this dream is all about. And somebody says, there's this guy, this Hebrew, this dude in jail, and he's pretty good at this dream analysis stuff. And since nobody else in the land can tell you what this dream means, the smartest people, all your PhDs, all of your professors, and all of your accountants and all of your educated people, and no one can tell you what this dream means. This guy can tell you, and he does. And God has him interpret that dream and says to him, Joesph to Pharaoh, that there's going to be a great famine. And so the dream means you got to save the nation and save the world, because Egypt is the breadbasket of the world. And you got to store up grain, because there's coming years when there will be no grain. And so Pharaoh does. And as they store it up, he wins favor, because indeed he rescues not only Egypt, but all of the area around the Mediterranean comes to Egypt in order to get food. The famine is so far-reaching that if you're going to live, you got to go to Egypt. And Pharaoh rewards him and says, there will be nobody higher than you, well, except me, Pharaoh, he says. So you'll be the deputy chief. You'll be Pharaoh number 2. This guy that was in prison, who was in the pit. And he goes then to become Pharaoh number 2. And because everybody that wants to live goes to Egypt, so do the brothers. Joseph's dad, Jacob, sends the brothers to Egypt to get food. They don't recognize their brother. The brother that they had thrown down into the pit. The brother that they didn't want anything to do with. The brother that they assumed was probably already dead. Well, the story goes that Joesph says to his brothers, go and get your dad. They bring his dad. They live. Pharaoh says, give them the good land of Goshen. There you go and you live as a people, tending sheep and farming and doing those things. His brothers are afraid. They know what they've done, and they know that they probably will be killed. This guy is high enough, all he has to do is say, take him out back and kill him. And he says, you know what you did to me, you intended for evil. What you did, you intended for evil. But God intended it for the good. You see, God didn't make the evil happen. Humans made the evil happen. And God took what even humans messed up and turned it for the good. That is the kind of God the story is about. And that's the kind of God that's sitting right next to you, whether you know it or not. A God who will take all of your stuff, all of your junk, all of your hot mess, and turn it to the good. Will do for you what you cannot do for yourself. Will take death and destroy it so that you may live with him eternally. That's the kind of God who, when the devils and the demons say, what you going to do about this? He says, wait and see. Wait and see. And out of the pit he comes. Regardless of who he was, regardless of what he did, out of the pit he comes. Into the jail he goes. Out of the jail he comes. Regardless of who he was, regardless of what he did, out of the jail he comes. He is taken to a level where he and he alone can see the hand of God and say, God's in this. And he intended it for good. And because Joesph is faithful, the nation that God creates for himself grows and flourishes there in Goshen. The words of Scripture said they went to Goshen and they became many. The sons of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph and the 12 now become tribes, and a nation is formed. Over the next several years, babies being born left and right, growing up, a nation is born. God's story is always one that we will not expect. that we cannot plan for, that we cannot help along. God is one who takes the worst that we have to dish out and will even use that for our good. Most of the time, nay, 99.9% of the time, we won't see it when we're in the midst of it. We'll only see it afterwards, when we look back and we say, ah. But while we're in the pit, while we're in the prison, while we're in circumstances that seem like we just are in disfavor, that the world is against us, that everything we try to do goes for naught, when we're down in the very pits of our existence, remember that is when God is closest and does a great thing. So, the next time I invite you, the next time something happens in your life, instead of going, boo-hoo, woe is me, isn't life miserable, and aren't things just gotta be careful what word I want to use here, but isn't it just junk? Woe is me. Instead, a person of faith may have the opportunity to look at that and say, hoo-hoo, what a hot mess. Wonder what God's going to do with this. Yeah, wonder what God's going to do with this. Because when things are at the very worst, God comes through with his very best. Those are the promises of God's story. What about your story? And God there. May we have eyes to see